Thanks for listening to Star Lores. If you like the show, please consider subscribing and giving a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also help us make more great content by becoming a patron at www.patreon.com. We would also love to hear from you on social media. You can follow Star Lores on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Enjoy the show, and may the Force be with you.
You are listening to the Star Lores Podcast. I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Are you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder?
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters. I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm here to rescue you.
You're who?
I'm here to rescue you. I've got your R2 unit. I'm here with Ben Kenobi.
Ben Kenobi? Where is he?
Come on.
Orphan, farm boy, pilot, hero, Jedi. Luke Skywalker is the most dynamic figure and main protagonist of the original Star Wars trilogy. His heroic journey from backwater orphan to Jedi Master is the central premise and the audience's first introduction to the galaxy far, far away.
Luke Skywalker and his twin sister Leia were born 19 years before the Battle of Yavin on the small asteroid colony Polis Massa to Naboo Queen and Senator Padme Amidala and former Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker at the conclusion of the Clone Wars. Padme died in childbirth, and Luke was secretly taken by the Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi to the desert planet of Tatooine to hide from Darth Vader and Sidious. During the Clone Wars, which raged until the moment of Luke's birth, Obi-Wan defeated a separatist general named Grievous and took possession of his starship. He flew this ship from Polis Massa to the smuggler's moon Nar Shaddaa, where he sold the vessel and used the funds to purchase a discreet passage to Tatooine with the infant Luke. Luke's birth came during a time of great political upheaval on the galactic stage. The Republic had been disbanded and the Galactic Empire succeeded its rule from the Republic Chancellor Sheev Palpatine. The Empire practiced a tyrannical system of government headed by the hated and feared Sith Lord Darth Sidious, known outside of Jedi circles as Emperor Palpatine. Palpatine used Darth Vader as his ruthless and violent enforcer, ensuring the Empire's autocratic stranglehold was tight across the throats of countless worlds. Together, Palpatine and Vader drew a cloak of darkness over the galaxy. Luke was adopted and raised on Tatooine by Anakin's stepbrother, Owen Lars, and his wife, Beru. Luke's adoptive parents and Obi-Wan hid Luke's Jedi and royal lineage from him for their entire lives.
Obi-Wan went into hiding close to the Lars homestead in Beggar's Canyon. The treacherous sheer rock walls and unique geology of the canyon set the stage for much Skywalker family drama. The canyon was an excellent place for hermits to hide throughout Tatooine's history, a tradition which Obi-Wan adopted while keeping a distant but watchful eye on Luke. At first, Obi-Wan visited the Lars homestead every day, but his intrusions soon made him unwelcome by the Lars family. Owen and Beru grew to resent the time Obi-Wan's visits took away from operating the moisture farm on the arid desert planet. Obi-Wan respected the wishes of the Lars and visited less frequently as time went on, eventually becoming a distant figure in Luke's life.
Luke was born sensitive to the Force and first exhibited his abilities at the age of 6 when he found a lost screwdriver using his Force-derived psychometric senses. Knowing the boy's parentage and the dark fate that befell his father, Owen went to great lengths to suppress Luke's abilities and discourage him from entertaining thoughts beyond regular farm life and responsibilities. At 10 years old, Luke had another supernatural experience. After an argument regarding the history of his father with his Uncle Owen, Luke stormed off into the desert. Soon after, a sandstorm overtook the boy. Amidst the raging winds and sands, he had an ominous vision of an imposing dark figure in the shape of Darth Vader, though Luke was unaware of the Sith Lord at the time. Emerging from the storm, Luke met a young boy who identified himself as Annie. The two boys discovered they had much in common, such as an affinity to piloting and mechanics, experiencing premonitions, and longing to leave their desert homeworld. Together, the boys found a buried Tusken Raider in the sand and took its nearby gaffy stick. They sought shelter in a cave, but were driven out by ferocious womp rats. Finally, Annie rigged an old astromech droid they stumbled across to explode in such a way as to create a flare to penetrate the sandstorm and signal for rescue. Instead of attracting a rescue team, the makeshift flare attracted a deadly crate dragon to Annie and Luke. Luke threw his scavenged gaffy stick at the beast's throat, killing the apex predator. Annie disappeared in the encounter, and Luke succumbed to exhaustion after the battle with the dragon. Uncle Owen and a search party eventually found Luke, but there was no evidence of either Annie or the crate dragon. Throughout his teenage years, Luke would meet Obi-Wan, now going by Ben Kenobi, intermittently.
At the age of 13, Luke and his longtime childhood friend Wyndham Marstrap could fly the high-performance airspeeders called T-16 Skyhoppers. It was while on a flying excursion in a T-16 that Luke and Wyndham crashed in the Tatooine wilderness. After surviving the wreckage, they fled from marauding Tusken Raiders. The two would encounter more trouble from hostile natives of the Tatooine desert. The hooded diminutive scavengers known as Jawas tried to salvage the crashed T-16s. Wanting to retain the salvage for themselves, the marooned pilots stopped the Jawas from making their day's earnings on the remains of the airspeeders. Repeating on an earlier episode in his life, Luke found himself trapped alongside Wyndham in a cave, and like a repeated line from a poem, a krat dragon hunted them to their refuge. This time, Luke didn't slay the beast, but was rescued by Uncle Ben Kenobi, who chased off the creature presumably with the use of a force ability. Ben again demonstrated his mastery over beasts by taming a large quadrupedal desert-dwelling lizard called a dewback. The trio rode across the sand-blasted waste back to the relative oasis of the Lars homestead. In his youth, Luke was put to work helping his uncle on the moisture farm. Luke's hobbies during this period were flying his T-16 Skyhopper, hunting womp rats, and spending time with his dog. It is not known precisely what kind of an education Luke received apart from the hands-on training in aviation, moisture farming, and mechanical trades. Luke socialized well in rural Tatooine. His friends included Biggs Darklighter, Janek Sunbear, Deacon, Laze Lonosner, and Cammy. These friends all grew up on farms and towns in Tashi Station and Anchorhead. While carousing with these friends, Luke earned himself the nickname Wormy. A local bully named Gorm Maldorf challenged Luke to a speeder bike race inside The Cage, a domed hazardous race course. Luke accepted the challenge, but the race would never happen. Gorm would meet his demise attempting to rig the racetrack in his favor. Ben Kenobi assisted Luke in uncovering the cause of Gorm's death later on. Luke suffered from wanderlust and became unsatisfied with the quiet life on Tatooine. In his later teenage years, many of Luke's friends would leave. Biggs Darklighter, one of Luke's closest friends, joined the Imperial Academy. The young pilot would defect to the Rebel Alliance, however, and never fought as an Imperial.
I want to come with you to Alderaan. There's nothing for me here now. I want to learn the ways of the Force and become a Jedi like my father.
Virtually alone on the planet, except for Lars and Beru, Luke repaired the droids R2-D2 and C-3PO, sold to Owen by tinkering Jawas. R2-D2 would brave the desert on his own in search of Ben Kenobi in order to relay a message from the rebel Princess Leia. Luke took 3PO with him to look for the AWOL astromech, and the three were attacked by Tusken Raiders. The old hermit Obi-Wan showed up and frightened the Raiders away before they could hurt anybody. Later on in the day, Obi-Wan revealed to Luke that his father was more than a spice freighter, pilot, and navigator, and that Owen had been lying to him for years. Obi-Wan went on to tell Luke that his father had been a famous Jedi Knight and veteran of the Clone Wars. In this version of Luke's lineage, Luke's father, Anakin, was killed by Obi-Wan's former pupil, the infamous Darth Vader. When Luke came home to the Lars homestead that night, he discovered the charred remains of his aunt and uncle. It was discovering that Imperial stormtroopers killed the only family and relationship he had left on the planet that prompted Luke to vow to follow in his father's footsteps and become a Jedi Knight and fight the Empire. Obi-Wan reluctantly began to instruct the youth in the ways of the Force. Luke piled the droids and Ben into his land speeder, and they made a desert-crossing trip to the seedy and violent settlement and spaceport of Mos Eisley. The droids, Luke, and Ben Kenobi met a smuggler called Han Solo at a cantina, from whom Obi-Wan purchased passage to Alderaan aboard a modified Corellian freighter called the Millennium Falcon.
The passengers and crew of the Falcon now included C-3PO, the gold-plated protocol droid, R2-D2, the tripod astromech droid, Chewbacca, the Wookiee mechanic and navigator, Obi-Wan, Ben Kenobi, a former Jedi Knight, Han Solo, the cocksure and sly pilot, and Luke Skywalker, orphan farm boy. The Falcon and her crew found themselves on a mission to rescue the rebel Princess Leia from the Death Star, a weapon of mass destruction on a planetary level. Ben Kenobi stays behind as the rest of the Falcon's crew escape from the Death Star after rescuing Leia. Darth Vader slays Obi-Wan, though his body seems to disappear, and his only remains are his robes and lightsaber.
After escaping the battle station, Luke joined the rebellion and was assigned to Red Squadron. The farm boy impressed the squadron's leader, Garvin Drees, and General Vanden Willard with his flight simulation performance. In the simulation, Luke opposed an entire enemy starfleet, dying only twice. Fellow rebel pilot, KN Lucky Farlander, taught Luke the basics of handling his new T-65 X-Wing starfighter, finishing his crash course in space combat. Before the raid on the Death Star, Luke reunited with his old friend Biggs Darklighter. The friends promised to catch up after winning the Battle of Yavin. This would be the last time the old friends met. Biggs, along with many new pilots Luke had befriended, were shot down attacking the Death Star. In his X-Wing, Luke battled with squadrons of light Imperial TIE fighters, turbo laser turrets, and even Darth Vader flying his own custom TIE fighter during the battle. During the raid, Han Solo joined the rebels mid-combat and rescued Luke from the first of many dangerous situations, giving Luke the opportunity to destroy the battle station. Incredibly, Luke fired 2 proton torpedoes into the narrow thermal exhaust port of the Death Star. He managed to do this without using his onboard targeting computer by means of his Force-enhanced perception. Obi-Wan's Force Ghost reached out to Luke during the chaos and slaughter of the space battle, and told Luke what to do. The torpedoes detonated inside the Death Star, causing a chain reaction that annihilated the Muz-sized ship. Destroying the Death Star made Luke a galactic war hero, a living legend. Luke, Han, Solo, and Chewbacca received the Rebel Alliance Medal for Bravery after the battle, and the galactic history is thereafter marked as ABY for years after the Battle of Yavin, and BBY for years before the Battle of Yavin.
Following the battle, Luke flew many missions for the Rebel Alliance. In the weeks following the Battle of Yavin, Luke destroyed an Imperial I-class Star Destroyer, Liquidator, retrieved new X-Wings from Incom Corporation engineer Vors Vorhorian, the designer of the X-Wing, participated in the Battle of Vaktuin, explored the unknown regions, and scouted possible locations for a new rebel base on remote worlds. Luke reluctantly accepted a mission on Tatooine to locate a crashed Imperial transport capsule where he became infected with Bledsoe's disease. The disease was engineered by Imperial scientists and took on unique effects based on the genetics of the infected. Symptoms of the disease were burning sensations on the skin, a florid discoloration and star pattern in the eyes, and dizziness. The disease was created and sent to worlds suspected of harboring rebels, marking any rebels who might be operating on the planet and possibly exposing rebel bases. On Munilinst, Luke entered a pod race to secure funding for the rebels. Humans are notably absent for most pod racing events, lacking the natural reflexes to successfully pilot the fast and dangerous pod racers. Like his father Anakin before him, Luke demonstrated superhuman reflexes and won the race, gaining a sizable contribution to the coffers of the rebel war effort. This victory and his other successes with the rebellion attracted the interest of the Emperor and his intelligence network. Time and again, Luke emerged as an exceptional individual in combating the Empire. the Emperor dispatched the Imperial assassin and spy X7 to keep tabs on the young rebel. Eventually, X7 tracked Luke to Yavin 4 and attempted to assassinate him. Following the attack, Luke went into hiding on Tatooine, where he connected with old friends. Here he encountered an Imperial sympathizer named Jackson, who challenged Luke to a race in their T-16 Skyhoppers. Both Skyhoppers were disabled by a booby trap laid by the infamous reptilian slaver and bounty hunter Bosk. Jabba the Hutt had placed a bounty on Luke's head, wanting to use the fledgling Jedi as bait to lure Han Solo out of hiding. Bosk captured Luke and took him into a cave in the Junlen Wastes. Luke escaped the imprisonment of Bosk, and in the resulting violence, Bosk lost an arm and a leg. Luke and Jackson then went into the Wastes, where they encountered a roving and hostile band of Tusken Raiders. Luke was able to scare them off using a crate dragon call, just as Obi-Wan had done years before. The Imperial assassin X7 was able to track Luke to Tatooine, but was defeated, this time by Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon. X7 was forced to retreat and remuster his forces for a third attempt. After coming out of hiding, Luke rejoined Red Squadron and flew a mission to the planet Kamino, home of the laboratories that produced the late Republic's clone armies. Red Squadron were sent to investigate the genetic research taking place on the planet. X7 had hired a mercenary pilot, Loon Divinian, operating under the name Div, to assassinate Luke on Kamino. Luke and the rebel pilots of Rogue Squadron discovered that the Empire was conducting genetic experiments. Div was captured by the rebellion before completing his contract on Luke's life. During the mission, Luke was captured by Imperial officer Rezi Suresh, the person in charge of the genetic experiments. His aim was to create the perfect assassins, of whom X7 was a failed attempt. He wanted these assassins to kill the pilot who had destroyed the Death Star. Luke was once again saved by Han Solo, who shot Rezi Suresh.
2 months after the Battle of Yavin, Luke, Leia, and Wedge Antilles continued to search for a new base as their headquarters on Yavin had been compromised. They failed in their initial attempt. Following the mission, under orders from Leia Organa, Luke, Wedge, and a number of other skilled and loyal fighter pilots would be reassigned to Grey Flight of Stealth Squadron, whose mission parameters placed them outside the official rebel military hierarchy. Stealth Squadron's main focus was rooting out an Imperial spy embedded in the ranks of the rebellion, and to continue the search for a new, hidden location for the rebel headquarters. During his time in Grey Flight, Luke ran afoul of Leia by disobeying a direct order. He was summarily grounded and lost access to his fighter along with fellow pilot Prithee. Leia replaced Luke and led the flight on a scouting mission. Once again, Obi-Wan's Force Ghost intervened and warned Luke that Leia was in danger. Armed with this knowledge, Luke and Prithee set off to save the princess. During the mission, Luke discovered that Prithee was a Force sensitive. 6 months after the destruction of the Death Star, Luke, Han, and Chewbacca went on a mission to investigate the activity of the Blood Scar pirates near Rebel supply lines. During the investigation, the group came across a squad of AWOL stormtroopers calling themselves the Hand of Judgment, and tentatively worked with the defectors. The crew of the Falcon and the Hand of Judgment stopped a pirate attack and assisted with saving Princess Leia. They also stopped a corrupt Imperial governor who is believed to be working with the pirates on the planet Shalkonwa. Obi-Wan's Force Ghost would periodically appear to Luke and continue to train him in the Force.
Following events of Shalkonwa, Luke was tracked down by a Tusken Raider named, and excuse me while I butcher this name, Kukharar, known as Hoer for short. The Tusken sought to avenge the death of his tribe. Luke resembled the demon outlander who had slaughtered Horar's people. The resemblance was more than coincidental, as it was Luke's father Anakin who was the demon outlander. Huar defeated Luke, but relented after having a vision of his true slayer of his clan. With that, the Tusken departed to track down his new quarry. Luke served the Rebel Alliance on numerous raids against the Empire, as well as defended Rebel assets from pirate attacks. Luke stumbled across the planet Hoth while evading Imperial forces, and reported the location to the isolated world to the Rebel Alliance. The Rebel Alliance evacuated their bases on the compromised fourth moon of Yavin, and from the planet Tela, and consolidated their forces on the remote world of Hoth. But this base's location would soon be compromised as well. The rebels learned of the incoming Imperial invasion and mobilized their forces to escape. During the evacuation, Luke led Red Squadron in punching a hole through the Imperial blockade of the sector. General Jan Dodonna was killed on board his ship, Republic, by turbo laser fire from Darth Vader's Superstar Destroyer Executor. After the evacuation, Luke was awarded the rank of commander for his valiant, though unsuccessful efforts to defend Dodonna's ship. The rank was not officially conferred by High Command as it had been fractured during the Battle of Hoth. Nonetheless, Luke attained the rank of Lieutenant Commander. After the Battle of Hoth, Luke adopted Commander Nara of Red Squadron as a mentor. Luke flew missions on Tatooine, Dantooine, Barkesh, Chorax, Corellia, Gerard V, and Raltier. As the command of Subgroup Rogue Flight was given to Luke, he would become a legendary squadron composed of the best pilots in the Alliance.
Luke also saw ground combat and took missions on the planets Jabim, Poln Minor, Callist 6, Kiva, and Per Lupello. During a mission to Lubang Minor, Luke encountered a clone trooper known as Abel, who served under the command of legendary Jedi General Shak Ti. Abel had been stranded on the jungle world since the Clone Wars. Luke convinced Abel to follow him into battle, as he had proven himself a Jedi like those Abel had previously served under. This experience led Abel to later join the Rebel Alliance. Luke also went on to encounter Janik Sunber, a former childhood friend from Tatooine, who had now become an Imperial Army officer. Luke used his previous relationship to leverage an escape for the Rebel fleet. Luke's next adventure would be triggered by a Force premonition. This precognition led him to the desert moon of Artus, where he encountered the previously believed extinct creatures called Rakghouls on the desert moon of Aradus. The monsters were under the control of an ancient Jedi called Celeste Morn, who had been driven mad by a dark side artifact, the Muir Talisman. Luke was defeated in saber combat by the possessed Jedi, and the spirit of a Sith Lord attempted to possess Luke. Leia Organa intercepted the attack and was herself assaulted by the spirit of the Dark Lord. Celeste Morn trapped the spirit of the Sith Lord named Canis Muir in her body and left the moon, seeking refuge in the deep core region of the galaxy. Celeste prophesied over Luke and informed him of a darkness haunting his past, present, and future before departing. Luke and Leia were then saved by Han Solo and Chewbacca as the Rakghouls formerly under Celeste's control became feral. Luke later attended the sacred Wookiee holiday, Life Day, on Kashyyyk with Chewbacca and his wife, Malatobuk, and Chewbacca's son, Lumpawaru, while simultaneously subverting an Imperial blockade of the planet Kashyyyk.
The following year, 2 years ABY, Luke accompanied Leia Organa on a diplomatic mission. They crashed their ship on the planet Mimban, where they encountered Hala, a Force-sensitive woman. Luke and Leia agreed to help Hala find a Kyber crystal on the planet in exchange for finding a way off the world. Unbeknownst to the group, Darth Vader was searching for the same crystal. Luke dueled Vader at the Temple of Pomojima, an ancient deity on the planet. The Cyclopean ziggurat hewn from the volcanic rock contained the Kyber crystal and the idol of Pomojima. Luke, infused by the power of the Kyber crystal and the Force spirit of Obi-Wan Kenobi, was able to defeat Darth Vader in the duel, serving one of his mechanical arms and sending him tumbling down a sacrificial pit. Upon escaping Mimban and returning to the Alliance, Luke was reassigned along with the rest of Rogue Squadron to the Rebel Fortress Echo Base on Hoth. While on a routine patrol, he was attacked and savaged by a Wampa, a deadly and massive bipedal carnivore native to Hoth. Luke escaped being eaten through the use of the Force and his lightsaber, severing the creature's arms as it pursued him. Stranded, alone, and likely suffering the effects of a severe concussion, Luke lost consciousness during the snowstorm. Han Solo defied the odds and ventured into the ice wastes, looking for his comrade in arms astride a tauntaun. Before Han found Luke, he was commanded by Obi-Wan's Force Ghost to go to the Dagobah system to complete his Jedi training with a long-exiled Jedi Master. Luke suffered severe injuries, including a crushed cheekbone and scars across his face, but recovered in a Bacta tank in time to help the defense of the Rebel against the Empire. Luke went out and battled Imperial forces with the newly minted Rogue Squadron, flying in speeders. The defenders of Echo Base were only buying time to evacuate the exposed secret headquarters as they were completely outmanned and outgunned by Blizzard Force. The army specialized in cold weather operations in charge of the invasion. Luke's speeder was shot down by a quadruple troop transport and artillery vehicle called an all-terrain armored transport. Luke's gunner and fellow rogue pilot, Dak Raltar, was killed by AT-AT blaster fire, and Luke crash-landed in the snow. Even without a vehicle, Luke managed to destroy an AT-AT using a grappling hook, lightsaber, and thermal detonator. Luke was picked up by his X-Wing once the Empire's forces destroyed Echo Base and the last rebel transport fled. Luke broke from the Rebel fleet and flew to Dagobah. On Dagobah, Luke encountered the impish exiled Jedi Master, Yoda, who was at first reluctant to train the brash Skywalker. Obi-Wan's Force Ghost later convinced Yoda to train Luke. Jedi training was difficult for Luke, as he had grown accustomed to a lifestyle of adventuring and rash decisions as a rebel war hero, and had difficulty with the meditative aspects of Jedi training.
During his training, Luke dueled a phantom vision of Darth Vader and received visions of his friends Han Solo and Princess Leia being tortured by the Empire. Luke gave in to his emotions and departed Dagobah before completing his training to rescue his friends. Yoda and Obi-Wan urged Luke to remain and finish his training, but their admonitions fell on deaf ears. Luke arrived on Cloud City on the planet Bespin, where he walked into a trap laid out by Imperial forces and lured Luke into a lightsaber duel with Darth Vader. Vader, attempting to have Luke frozen in carbonite, fails, and the two continue their duel until Vader defeats Luke by slicing his hand off. As Luke realizes he is trapped in the ventilation system with Vader, wounded and weaponless, the Sith Lord reveals himself as Anakin Skywalker, Luke's father. Vader attempts to seduce Luke to the dark side and promises to make him his apprentice, overthrow the Emperor, and rule the galaxy together. Overcome with disbelief, turmoil, and heavily wounded from the duel, Luke allows himself to drop down a shaft that leads to an exterior weather vane on the underside of Cloud City. Luke reaches out with the Force and connects with Leia, who had been rescued by Lando Calrissian, the administrator of Cloud City. The Falcon arrives at Luke's precarious position on the weather vane and rescues him. Luke, Leia, Lando, Chewbacca, R2-D2, and C-3PO aboard the Millennium Falcon escaped with the Rebel fleet. The crew failed to rescue Han Solo, who had been frozen in carbonite and taken by the notorious bounty hunter Boba Fett, back to the crime lord Jabba the Hutt on Tatooine due to an outstanding debt. Luke tracked Boba Fett to the planet Gaul and attempted a rescue with Rogue Squadron. Leia, Lando, and the smuggler Dash Rendar assisted Rogue Squadron. The rescue attempt failed, and fellow Rogue Squadron pilot Wes Jansen's sabotaged astromech droids malfunctioned and targeted Skywalker. Skywalker disabled the droid before it did any damage. Luke journeyed back to Tatooine, where he lived in Obi-Wan's former residence. He discovered an old journal that contained instructions on how to build a lightsaber. Luke assembled his new weapon with a green blade.
A swoop gang hired by Jabba the Hutt to kill Skywalker tracked him to Kenobi's old adobe home in Beggar's Canyon. The smuggler Dash Rendar, hired to help protect Luke, fended off the attack. Luke later intercepted a messenger droid and deciphered the password with a message sent by Bothan spymaster Koth Milan, indicating that the Imperial freighter Suprosa was carrying information that could be useful to the Rebel Alliance. Luke set off with Dash Rendar to coordinate an attack on the freighter with Koth Milan and trained a squadron of Bothan Y-Wing pilots. Though successful, the rebels took many Bothan casualties. Luke returned to the Bothan base where a counterattack by bounty hunters led to Luke's capture. Now a seasoned escape artist, Luke escaped the bounty hunters and was informed by Chewbacca that Princess Leia had been captured by the criminal organization Black Sun. The green-skinned Faline leader of Black Sun, Prince Caesar, was behind the repeated attacks on Skywalker as part of a political rivalry with Darth Vader. Luke rendezvoused with Chewbacca, Lando Calrissian, and Dash Rendar. The four rebel heroes split up and infiltrated Caesar's palace through the sewers. The group fought their way to Leia and successfully rescued her. Caesar took the opportunity to shoot at Luke, but he deflected the blast with his lightsaber. Lando dropped a thermal detonator down a maintenance shaft in an attempt to destroy the entire building. During the escape back to the Falcon, Luke was challenged to unarmed combat by the human replica droid and right hand of Caesar, Guri. Luke beat her with the help of the Force and offered her the opportunity to join the Rebel Alliance. Guri declined, citing the lack of resources the rebellion had to reprogram her. Luke reluctantly abandoned her and escaped with the band of rebels before Caesar's palace exploded. The rebels were pursued by Prince Caesar's private fleet, but the timely arrival of Rogue Squadron and Imperial forces led to a three-way battle between the rebels, Black Sun forces, and the Empire. Darth Vader commanded the Imperial fleet, seeking vengeance for Caesar's meddling. Amidst the chaos of the battle, the rebels escaped, though they lost contact with Dash Rendar, who had presumably been killed in the conflict. Luke then went on to investigate the disappearance of two rebel operatives, Tay Vanis and Yam Argo. Along with the information Luke and Dash Rendar acquired on the Suprosa, Tay and Yam confirmed the existence of critical information pertaining to a second Death Star. At the same time, Lando Calrissian learned that Boba Fett had finally delivered the carbonite-frozen Han Solo to Jabba the Hutt. Luke and company orchestrated an elaborate plan to rescue Han Solo. 9 months after the Battle of Hoth, Luke sent the droids R2-D2 and C-3PO to infiltrate Jabba the Hutt's palace on Tatooine, followed by Lando Calrissian, Leia, and Chewbacca. Leia posed as a slaver, attempting to sell Chewie to Jabba. Skywalker came to the palace wearing no disguise and revealed himself to Jabba, respectfully requesting that Han be released. In response, Jabba dropped Luke down a trap door to be eaten by a pet rancor. Even unarmed, the powerful Jedi defeated the beast, though his escape was yet to come. Leia unfroze Han from his carbonite prison, but in the process was herself captured by Jabba, and Han's position was not improved. All the captured rebels, including Han, were sentenced by Jabba to be thrown into a monstrous sarlacc in the dune wastes of Tatooine. With his teammates embedded aboard Jabba's barge, Katana, Luke was able to acquire his lightsaber and rescued Han, while Leia strangled Jabba the Hutt with the chains that he tethered her with. Katana crashed into the dunes, and many of Jabba's minions and associates died. Luke returned to Dagobah to complete his Jedi training with Yoda. The aging Jedi Master confirmed that Vader was indeed Luke's father, and Obi-Wan confirms that Leia was his sister. Yoda told Luke that he had nothing left to teach him, and that he would have to confront and defeat Darth Vader to truly become a Jedi. Yoda then passed away peacefully in front of Luke, leaving no corpse, as Obi-Wan had also done.
Luke joined the rebel raid on the forest moon of Endor in an operation to destroy the second Death Star, but left the mission and turned himself over to the Empire. He did this to gain access to Darth Vader, believing that he could redeem his father to the light side of the Force. Before departing, Luke revealed to Leia Organa that she is his sister and the daughter of Darth Vader. Vader had Luke captured alive and brought before the Emperor on board the second Death Star. The Emperor sought to turn Luke to the dark side and replace Darth Vader as his new apprentice. Luke attempted to assassinate the Emperor. After it was revealed that he was aware of the rebel plot to destroy the second Death Star, and that they had been lured into a trap. Darth Vader intervened and dueled with Luke, discovering the existence of his daughter, Leia Organa, in the process. Luke, almost overcome by the temptation of the dark side to slay his father, engages in a final duel, severely crippling the Sith warrior and cutting off his hand. Catching himself with the throes of the dark side, Luke overcomes his temptation for vengeance and tosses aside his lightsaber, affirming himself as a Jedi and shunning the dark side of the Force. The Emperor, disappointed with his failure to seduce Luke to the dark side, unleashed a torrent of Force lightning in an attempt to torture Luke to death. Darth Vader, seeing his son defeat the darkness himself, experienced flashbacks of a similar experience many years ago, when Palpatine used the same power to kill Mace Windu, one of the few people who could have stopped the rise of the Empire. Vader then turned on the Emperor and killed the physically infirm Sith Lord by throwing him down a nearby shaft. Vader was hit by the Force lightning in his attack on the Emperor, and it damaged his life support system on his suit, leading to his death. Though some experts on the Force insist that it was Vader's conversion to the light side that led to his death, it not being able to tolerate the energy after decades of corruption by the dark side. Meanwhile, the Rebel attack on the second Death Star proved successful, and Luke is forced to evacuate the crumbling Death Star. Luke attempted to drag the critically injured Darth Vader to safety as the redeemed Anakin Skywalker. He requests to see his sons face to face. Luke removes his father's helmet and looks upon his pallid and scarred face for the first time. Anakin validates his son's effort to redeem him and dies. Flying Anakin's personal shuttle, Luke escapes to Endor as the Death Star explodes in his wake. On the Forest Moon, Luke cremates Anakin's remains, still inside his armor, in the tradition of the Jedi Order. The destruction of the second Death Star and the death of the Emperor caused the final collapse of the Empire, and firmly established Luke and his companions as heroes of mythical stature in the galaxy.
So that was Luke Skywalker's intro and early life biography. We're just going to break into some discussion around that. Most prominently, I guess, now with the new canon and Disney, there's some comparisons now to be made with The Last Jedi and how Luke kind of evolves as a character. This being his primary arc now concluded at the end of Return of the Jedi. That's where this episode leaves off. And the character assassination that takes place. I guess first we could talk about his disappearance and complete absence from The Force Awakens, his first hit.
Not complete absence.
Well, yeah, sure. One freeze frame at the end of an entire movie.
Yeah, well, you said complete. That's the definition.
You're right.
Of complete.
Okay. Incomplete absence then. And then the resulting
Nearly complete absence.
Mewling old man who has completely lost his way by the end of the movie and has to be shown again the light. Yeah, it's quite a contrast. I think that'll become more evident as we dive further into Luke's life and kind of see how he, rebuilds and reorganizes the Jedi Order, at least in the old canon and compared to the new Disney canon.
Yeah, definitely the new Luke is a very different tone than the old Luke. Definitely doesn't feel like the same character in a lot of ways. The Rian Johnson Luke Skywalker, anyway, compared to the George Lucas Skywalker. And I think even Mark Hamill said as much in interviews.
He definitely wasn't a fan of his own depiction.
Yeah, but I don't know, what are some major differences if you could pick out a couple things from the original Luke to the new interpretation of Skywalker?
So, okay, I will give one concession, is that, and we'll again see this later on as we go farther into Luke's life history, Luke does have some backsliding moments where he's tempted by the dark side. He's not done his journey.
Yeah.
Right. So I will say that he has some dark moments in the future of the old,
especially
canon
in
as well.
like is it the Dark Empire?
Yes, that's exactly what I was referring to.
Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
But is that a Legends? Or is that...
It is
Legends?
now.
Okay,
yes.
yeah, it's Legends
But back in
canon.
the day, like, so not to make Luke out to this perfect hero by the end of the Last Jedi, he'll still have other struggles later on. But the Johnson version of Luke pretty much just abandons the entire progressive arc that he has gone through, from this like whiny farm boy to like a mature Jedi Knight and even Jedi Master by the end. And then you'll see him progress even further to this like wise Jedi, similar to Yoda or Ben Kenobi or Obi-Wan.
I was actually going to say that his depiction in The Last Jedi to me is very similar to Yoda in the first trilogy. He's like very irreverent and sort of goofy and dismissive even of like
that's kind of true
of the typical Jedi things. And I mean, obviously there are concessions in the story itself, but I found out, at least in like his dialogue and Luke's performance of that character, he reminded me a lot of Yoda. And also because Luke is sort of inherently a very dynamic character, as you were saying, like he changes a lot between A New Hope and Jedi Knight, and that maybe Luke is just the kind of person who changes a lot during his life, and that's just sort of
part of it. Yeah,
part of it is what we see in The Last Jedi. To be kind, undeservingly, to The Last Jedi.
I do like that. However, the difference is Yoda put it on as an act. And behind that act, Yoda was actually that wise Jedi Master that you see.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas with Luke, he's just
that mask is never removed.
No, it wasn't a mask for Luke. Luke was a depressive, a-hole that didn't want to train anyone new, and
that's
was
true.
Living as a hermit, right? That wasn't an act. Luke had to refine his way to, being a Jedi Master. So I found that almost a nice comparison, but then it falls flat, as everything does in that movie.
It falls flat on the story, but I think in the performance and the core idea is fine. But as you say, the plot just sort of falls apart.
Yeah. Again, a lot of this further on, like you will see Luke also reform the Jedi Order, and he puts out a new set of rules, as we'll see later.
And this reformation is in the Legends.
Yes,
canon.
We're talking about the Legends here for the most part. We'll try and distinguish between the two whenever we can. But yeah, you'll see him like rise to this new height in Jedi Order. We haven't seen a lot of that in the Last Jedi's canon, the Disney canon. We have like glimpses of when he was training Ben Solo. Man, this is gonna get confusing because there's also a Ben Skywalker in the old canon.
Yeah.
But anyways, in the new Disney canon, we don't see a lot of like the Jedi Order that he spawned. We just see like little snippets of him training Ben, and that's it. Like for all we know, he only trained the one Jedi that falls to become Kylo Ren. Whereas in this Star Wars canon, or the Legends, he recreates this whole order, right? And he reestablishes it. Not quite like the old one, and at some point we'll get into the comparisons with the old Jedi Order and after Luke's reformations. But there's quite a different dynamic there.
Like most good cult leaders, one of the first reforms to the Jedi Order that Luke made was removing the vow of celibacy for Jedis so that he could get laid.
The other thing too with Luke going into exile, there's also a comparison to be made with Obi-Wan in exile. But I think, again, not to belabor the point, the Obi-Wan in exile was that his feeling that he failed Anakin and wanted to escape the Empire, whereas Luke fails his pupil and runs away from his own mistake, right?
Yeah,
there's a very clear difference in the reasons why they go into hermit mode.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem I had with the Johnson interpretation of Luke Skywalker is, though you guys are correct that Luke, sort of his tone and his style changes a lot, but there isn't any indication, at least in the original series or Lucas's interpretation, that Luke is like nihilistic in any kind of way. And in the new film, Luke is like very nihilistic and almost seems to like it's like that very first scene where he's holding the lightsaber and just throws it over his back. It's like almost, it's like a symbolism of saying like, I don't care about this. Everything that was said or done before
is meaningless.
Yeah, it's completely meaningless. It's pointless. There's no point in rehashing the past. It's sort of like, it's a deconstruction in a way, but it just doesn't, to me, that felt like the most inconsistent with who like Luke actually is. And more to your point, where he goes into like hiding and abandons his like Jedi responsibility. That isn't what Obi-Wan would do.
Obi-Wan was even like training Luke, or trying to, until the Larses kind of stonewalled him out.
Yeah.
But I'll also be the devil's advocate again here and provide us with sort of some headcanon for why Luke is acting that way. He's really kind of like a Buddhist master or something at that point, right? Saying that like
he's achieved true
detachment.
Yeah.
None of this does matter. Your lightsaber doesn't matter. Your beliefs don't matter. It's all the Force or whatever.
I would agree with you if there was more thought put into those movies.
Yeah,
that's why you got to do headcanon.
That could be.
At that point, you're just writing your own movie.
But you know what? If there was some philosophical basis for that belief that he has, then I would accept it. Except it just seems like he's bitter because Ben betrayed him, and so now he's like a bitter teenager who's like F the world.
Yeah, I do agree.
Which is like a little odd. It seems off kilter for who Luke is.
Okay, and moving on from the Disney versus old Legends lore, let's talk about Luke within his own story within the Legends universe. We see kind of two versions of Luke, even just from this introduction part. We have Luke the Jedi versus Luke the Rebel hero. A lot of his adventures don't make it to the big screen. We see a lot of the Jedi progression, but Luke does a lot of stuff for the rebellion. And like is a soldier fighting in this, arc as a rebel, as much as his transformation into a Jedi Master, which I found really interesting reading about his life. Like he's a jet fighter squadron leader. Like he's no slouch in combat.
Professional prisoner.
He doesn't get captured a lot
because it does seem, I don't know if anybody who is listening is paying attention. We should put this in at the beginning, but you can totally play a drinking game where every time Luke is imprisoned or somebody loses a limb, take a shot and you'll be hammered by the end of this episode.
Or alcohol poisoning.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to highlight that.
He is sort of like almost a special ops force for the
rebellion.
But
a really bad special ops force.
Yeah, because
he keeps getting kidnapped.
But he keeps getting away. So
because Han Solo keeps rescuing him.
That's true.
Han Solo is the real hero
hero
of the Star Wars universe when you think about it.
It's actually kind of
You know who else gets captured a lot? James Bond. So
that's true, yeah.
He would be at least a 00 level agent for the rebellion.
Yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about Luke as kind of outside of the universe, kind of as a hero with 1,000 faces. He's like the central protagonist that Lucas, started us off with, and who is the main character that we start the arc with. Now, I would argue maybe that Anakin / Darth Vader is the true hero of the Star Wars Legends. You follow him from childhood all the way to his death. But Luke becomes definitely a secondary force and is the first hero that anyone is introduced with the Star Wars universe. I don't know if you know anything more about that, Sam. I actually haven't read
about Joseph Campbell and the hero of 1,000 faces.
I have my own opinion.
He is sort of like the
everyman hero.
He is the monomythical sort of hero.
Yeah,
I did in preparing, not for this episode specifically, but when I found out we were doing this podcast, I did try to make my way through a 9-hour interview documentary with Joseph Campbell.
Wow.
That was filmed at the Skywalker Ranch.
Really?
Wow.
Actually.
That's interesting.
So Joseph Campbell was a big fan of Star Wars, and he thought Lucas really hit upon the ideas. I didn't get into it enough to really know what exactly.
and do
just
like a point-by-point comparison.
And just so people know, Joseph Campbell was sort of an author's sort of...
He was an academic.
Yeah,
he was
literary guy.
He was a philologist or something like that.
Yeah.
And he sort of developed sort of overarching theory about like human mythology and how humans develop mythology, and it was surmised in his book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces, which Disney pulls a lot from his formula that he creates with story arcs and character arcs. So
although if Joseph Campbell is to be believed, though, I mean, it's sort of just a natural part of how humans tell stories.
Right. So even if you follow his formula
like,
or not, you're naturally
you're
following
always
into
following
that pattern.
his formula, right?
And that's kind of how I understand Campbell as well. But you can definitely, Star Wars, especially the original trilogy, is a very
intentional.
It maps very cleanly with Campbell's ideas about the hero with 1,000 faces. Other stories do this too. One that comes to mind is like Harry Potter is a classic example of the hero's journey. And yeah, there's plenty of other ones as well, but those are if you think about like a hero story arc, those are like Luke Skywalker and Harry Potter are great examples.
In a nutshell, then the hero's journey thing we're talking about is sort of any story where there's a hero who starts out as an everyman, just an ordinary Joe Blow, and maybe even disadvantaged in some way, like Harry Potter, right? He's
an orphan.
Nothing special.
He's orphaned, and then they go on throughout the course of the story to become
the hero.
Something very special.
We're actually going to do a whole episode on the monomyth. We're going to go through it point by point. So we won't dive into the details. Yeah, but we will definitely get into that for any listeners.
At least people who know get a rough idea of what we're referencing.
Of what we're talking about here. And it will come up a lot every time we talk about Star Wars. It will likely come up again. Yeah. And like I said, we'll do a whole episode discussing it more completely.
I'll finish that 9-hour documentary.
Please do, and come back to us with all your notes.
Yeah.
The last kind of point I wanted to make with Luke, we kind of have this competition now between Luke and Anakin being the main characters of Star Wars. And was Luke an everyman or a chosen one? And was Luke the chosen one, predicted to in the prophecy?
I've already gone on record as saying that I do believe Anakin was the chosen one and fulfilled the prophecy of the chosen one.
Ultimately himself.
Yes. I subscribe to that as well. I do believe it's actually about Anakin. It's not the whole story.
Luke is
actually
a side character.
But it is a sort of genius way to do it, right? Like
he's the best side character ever written.
Like you kind of think that it's all about Luke, but it's actually all about Anakin.
He's Sam to his Frodo.
Yeah, exactly. But even in the new canon, I think sort of the spirit of Vader, if you will, is still permeates the new movies in a lot of ways, and maybe not as much in the Legends canon, where that seems to be more about Palpatine, but I guess that remains to be seen with the new film coming out.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. But I mean, there are those that would make the argument that, Luke is the hero, and a lot of this comes from people who grew up with the original trilogy of Star Wars before the prequels, before we knew anything more about Anakin. Because to everyone, Luke would have been the main character of Star Wars from 1977 up until 2001, which is a significant amount of time.
So 1999.
Is that when?
Yeah, that's when the Phantom Menace came out.
So what I would actually respond to that is Lucas, his original story had to do with Anakin, and I think that because obviously he wrote it as like episode 4, 5, and 6.
I'm not sure though. There are a few different versions of what the original draft is.
I do understand that, but he did change it to like he very intentionally changed it to like episode 4. You're actually starting in the middle of the story, not at the end or the beginning of the story.
Have you read the Blue Harvest graphic novel?
No.
That's about this. I don't think Anakin's in it at all.
Oh, really?
But I mean, the whole world is almost unrecognizable.
Oh, okay.
Compared to what we view as typically Star Wars.
Yeah,
we should do an episode on that too.
We really should.
Yeah, it'll be like
it's a fun little sci-fi romp.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'm just saying,
Han
I
Solo
think
is a gigantic, scaly green monster.
What?
Yeah, I'm dead serious.
what is it? Okay.
It's like the original drafts of Star Wars, and then they actually turned it into a graphic novel in its
okay.
complete form.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting,
So
interesting.
you can actually go back and look at it.
Yeah, but I would just say, like, if you think about, like, the creator, it does seem like he intended for, like,
More to the story.
yeah, it's more Anakin is actually, like, the
Central figure.
the central figure. But
And Darth Vader is actually like often celebrated as a one of the best villains in sci-fi. So
Yeah.
he does occupy a lot of screen time. A lot of traditional sci-fi and other fantasies don't pay a lot of attention to the villain. He's, a bad guy for the sake of being bad. He's not very well developed.
Yeah,
and
that's
everything is
true.
focused on the hero. Whereas Star Wars, even in the original trilogy, Darth Vader has a significant presence.
And I mean, yeah, like just going into some of the things I'm super interested in, especially with villains, is just, as you're saying, well developed. Like every single part of the Vader character is well developed. Like he's got his cape and his crazy boots.
Yeah, everything from
and
his
skull,
appearance.
his skull face / Odin looking mask,
his voice, even.
his voice.
Yeah.
It's like, and the fact that he's got James Earl Jones' voice, which is
Yeah.
an amazing voice, but then it's also got the weird distortion on top of it, and he's got the red lightsaber.
Yeah.
Like
And David Prowse's body, like a big imposing
he's
body.
the perfect villain.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's everything from like the imagery to the character.
His lines,
Yeah, he's
his character.
very well developed in like multiple dimensions. But yeah, just something interesting to keep in the back of your mind as we continue our trek through Star Wars, comparing Anakin to Luke's journey, seeing how they interact with the galaxy, and everything else. And we'll continue our comparisons to what's going on with Disney. But until then,
We'll continue our love affair.
with Star Wars.
I'm still for sale, Disney. I can destroy this podcast from the inside out. I'll be a mole.
Gun for hire, basically.
And at that note, we're going to start censoring Sam and sign off here.
Yeah. Peace out.
May the forks be with you.
You are listening to the Star Lords Podcast.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Are you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder?
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
I got a bad feeling about this.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to give the show a 5-star rating and review, and give us a follow on social media. This episode was produced and edited by me, Jordan Swaim, written and directed by Christian Lutz and Sam Swaim. All original music was scored and recorded by my music project, Farewell to Shadowland.